What is up, everybody? Today we're talking about Mamiya, and specifically talking about the Mamiya RZ67, because I have a collection of them here at the studio. 4 bodies, a bunch of lenses, all kinds of accessories and stuff like that, which we'll get into. They kind of inherited them here with the studio. They were using them with the digital Phase One P25 back for years. I started, I think, assisting here at the studio, I don't know, it was over 10 years ago. And here when we were doing shoots that were studio-based, we would be using that camera. There were Nikons around that we'd take on the road, but for high-end stuff, we even took this on the road, always tethered to a laptop or tethered to the computer here. I haven't used it ever tethered because it's FireWire and nothing really hooks up to that, and I haven't found a way to do adapters. Anyways, I was going to talk a little bit about the whole history, or a brief history actually, and then a little bit what my intent to do with these are, because I think they're really interesting and they shouldn't just be sitting on a shelf as display pieces as far as I'm concerned. I have a whole vintage camera collection and I like to use them when I can. But just get started, Mamiya was founded by a camera designer, Seishi Mamiya, in 1940 in Tokyo. He had a financial backer. I know the last name is Sugawara. I'll just put his name on screen right now because my memory and I don't speak Japanese to pronounce it well enough. But Mamiya made all kinds of cameras early on, you know, 35 millimeter and stuff like that. But they really became known for their medium format stuff. And I don't think after the late 70s, early 80s, they even made 35 millimeter cameras anymore. You know, the big kind of one that really, I think, put them on the map as far as most people were concerned was the RB67. And RB stands for rotating back. So you could spin the film back without having to take it off the camera. It was a big, heavy camera, mostly designed for studio work. Some people used them on location, but not a lot. They were highly innovative. You know, the 6x7 format, they were one of the first to really do that. And so you didn't have to crop very much to get to, you know, images like 8x10. So it was kind of a big deal for that stuff as well. Modular systems, you know, so you have the body, the lens, and then the back, the film backs. So you could, you know, switch those out with dark slides while you're shooting, so you could have color film and black and white film, you know, whatever, and switch it without, you know, having to finish the roll, which is really cool. The shutters are in the lenses. It's really cool too because they're leaf shutters, so you could use high sync speeds and all that. So in 1982, they came out with the RZ67, which was kind of a replacement, a little bit lighter, and then it also had electronical connections, yeah. Uses these little batteries for the shutter and stuff like that. It's still at a mechanical mode for emergencies, which you could turn it to, which is 1/400th of a second. That was a thing, you know, in the, I think, early 80s, late 70s, mostly early 80s when cameras started going electronic. A lot of pros still wanted a backup mode in case something went wrong. You have an emergency, you could still get some shots out. Just lighter, a little easier to use, and, you know, electronics, so you could get different viewfinders. I believe there are viewfinders with light meters built in and stuff like that. They made 3 models. In 82 when it came out, there was just the RZ67 Professional. Then in 93, they made a Professional 2, which had some upgraded focus knobs and stuff like that. I believe it's this one here. I have to double check a couple things to see if this is the original or if it's the 93. And then the Pro 2D, which I have 3 of those bodies. And those ones came out in 2004. And they were kind of the most interesting because they were designed to be able to take digital backs and stuff like that. And that's one of the things I have here on this camera is the Phase One P25. I actually already hooked this up. I couldn't get it working for a while. I wrote out to a camera shop in Kent. The guy was helping me. I don't know what I did. I ordered the original kind of battery it took, a silver oxide, put it in, still wasn't working, gave it up for a minute, then came back and started messing with it again. And it worked. So I don't know if I switched something that I didn't notice, so again, more research is needed, but it's worked since then. Last night I took just a few little quick photos with it, so I'll throw those on screen, but I'm excited to really try this out. One of the things I really want to do is put some of the really long portrait lenses on there, you know, and see what it looks like. And the reason I really want to mess with the P25 is, even from these quick images, the center still looks really, really good, but that medium format look, so being able to shoot digital and get that medium format look, you know, with the 4.5 and the long lenses. So when you, if you're only used to 35 or what we now call full frame on, you know, your Canon R5 or your Sonys that you buy, the higher end ones, this is almost double with the crop factor. So, you know, when you have a 90 millimeter lens on, it would be like more equivalent to a 45. on a traditional full frame, regular camera. So that's really, really cool. So there should be a really unique look from that. The sensor is really interesting. I went back to some websites like Luminous Landscape, which I'll link below, and read their initial review of the P25. So in 2004, they're talking about how it's just pretty much the best thing that has ever come out digitally. It's just head and shoulders above what else there is. The other cool thing about the P25 is you didn't need anything external. That might sound weird, but when you were putting digital backs onto cameras back in the day, you either had to run cables, or you had batteries in your pockets, or you had hard drives in your pockets that were connected. This fit right onto the module system with electric connections and was able to actually communicate with the camera and just work. That only does that on the Pro 2Ds, by the way. You do have to do a cable to the shutter if you use one of the older models with the P25. It's interesting to read those old reviews too. Like if you're a nerd, if you're watching this video, you probably are a little nerdy about this stuff. To see what they're talking about, like the computer processing and stuff you would need to use one of these. When they're talking about the Mac, they're talking about getting the G5 or whatever. When they're talking about PC, they're like a 3.5 gigahertz processor. Make sure you have 2 gigs of RAM. All stuff that seems so small now. And it hit me that when I started working here and I started buying my own nicer cameras, the photographer Rick would ask me like questions about like file size, and not in terms of megapixels and stuff like that, but like megabytes, which is just something in my career, hobbyist and now career, I've never really been concerned of, because memory is just such a different thing. Now with all the SSDs I have and the way I have my backup RAID systems and all that, I just don't really think of how big my file size is when I shoot RAW. But in 2004, with computing power, that would have been a concern. The other thing we're talking about is when the P25 came out is the price. It was $29,000, basically round up to $30,000, because I think it was like $29.99 or whatever. So gigantic investment back in the day. In the Luminous Landscape article, they compare it to how much film you would go through and how long it would take to pay itself off in 120 film, which is kind of also interesting, because that's still a place a lot of pros were at that time, where they would shoot 120 and then do high resolution scans. I know one reason Rick made the big investment into this is he had a lot of clients that were saying, we want a full digital workflow. That's where we're at, that's what we want. And it didn't matter that like the backs just a few years before this were not quite as good as it would be to scan like some film in a lot of cases. So this is kind of the one that pushed it to the next level and made digital way more professional if you could afford something like this. So anyways, yeah, the plan for me with these is I have the film backs. I have a bunch of film backs. I actually have them loaded, one with color, one with black and white. So I want to take these out, shoot some film through them, do videos talking about that. First, I'm going to start with doing the digital though, because I think it's really interesting to me. And like I said, already taking a couple photos and seeing how good the sensor still is. I also have all kinds of accessories I wouldn't mind going through. The batteries were dead for this camera. I did find a company on eBay that still makes a charger and new batteries that work with it. That's how I'll be shooting it. As mentioned, that Firewire is not really usable. Shooting tethered through Capture One would have been the way it was done. That's not the way I'll be able to do it. There are Polaroid backs here. It's the way you could test your exposures in the studio back in the day. A number of them. I think this is for 4x5 Polaroid. Again, stuff I'll look into. The auto winder probably won't. No real reason to mess with an auto winder at the pace I'm shooting, not professional stuff. Then we have all the different kind of finders, so we'll get into those. Some have loops, It was really interesting last night, even going to shoot, you have to remember everything moves backwards and then you're back to manual focus. And these manual focus with bellows, which is kind of interesting as well. And I know there were a lot of benefits when these cameras came out to having bellows and the RBs having them. So in 2009, Phase One actually started investing heavily in Mamiya and then bought them outright by 2015. So it's not really the original Mamiya anymore. And a lot of the parts that when I look them up, they're discontinued now. So it's really great that I have a lot of the stuff, the different plates on the back and all that. One thing I found with the P25 is there's 2 of these cameras are set up different. And one has the back that locks in portrait mode, and one has it where it locks in a landscape mode. And I meant to ask Rick before I went to make this video if they just use those 2 cameras and switch the back between them depending on what they were doing. Because as mentioned, the film backs do rotate, and so it has me wondering, is there a plate that made the digital back rotate? Was it too expensive? Have I just not found it here at the studio yet? There's still a lot of stuff around, and that's what'll make this fun to explore. Get subscribed if you want to see more of this kind of thing. It'll be an ongoing series I plan to do into the spring and the summer. The first thing I like of saying is the digital back. I really want to do the portraits with it, and that'll probably be the next video about these cameras. And as I do that stuff, I'll talk a little bit more about the specifics and the use of them. You know, the fact that these, the levers cock the shutter and advance the film at the same time if you're using film. Just a lot of interesting things about them and what we discover as we go forward along the way in making these videos. So those will be out in the field and having a little more fun. This is just a basic intro, and that'll do it for this one. I will see you in the next video.